welcome. I'm going to officially start. I threatened last time that episode 1 might be the only one, but I think, after we recorded and then you talked to Molly, she was like, you guys both got excited. And so we put something on the calendar, and a few weeks later, here we are. So I'm here with Carol Van Warmer again, she's pretty much the host at this point, and Molly Murphy, who is a legend. I mean, both are legends, but I think you only become a legend after you leave. I don't
Whatever
know.
you really are happens after you leave.
It's like dying.
I hope not. So welcome. We are here to talk, and this might turn into several podcasts, or it might just be one long one. We'll see. But I'm Stephen Ainley. You're finishing up year 2 at Deer Park Homelink. And somehow I get to talk to these lovely ladies. So welcome. Today we're going to be focusing on just the parent side of stuff. Homeschooling as a parent, signing up for classes at Deer Park Homelink. So I'm just going to not talk and let these two ladies jibber jabber, I think is the term that you guys are used to. Jibber jabber. That's a phrase, right?
We accept it.
Go for it.
So welcome. If you want, would you, there's nothing brief, but would you give us because we got a little bit of when you came in from Carol's episode last time. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, what brought you here, and why you stuck around for so long?
Oh, couldn't leave. Well, let's see. I started in 2002. Carol's program had been in existence for 2 years, and my understanding is that, it had just grown pretty rapidly. Carol was offering something people wanted, and families were starting to drive from a distance. It wasn't just a localized Deer Park sort of opportunity. And that third year was the year that Carol brought in a number of people. You brought in Mike, Carol, for you needed a computer lab, and turns out what a wonderful, gentle, just right spirit he was with students and with parents, and he was well known in Deer Park, and he just was a great addition. You brought in Sue Bierce for we needed to have a library. After that, I could go Charlotte McCoy. There were any number of people, Melissa Duran. People started working for Carol, but I came thinking that the interview was for a consultant. We're from the Midwest. I was unfamiliar with homeschooling, I'm sorry to say. It sure changed me, but at the time of the interview, I didn't know as much about homeschooling. But I had been part of special ed. I had taught gifted education for 9 years in West Virginia, and we moved here. And anyway, it was in October. What a funny time. In October, I was looking for a job, and there was something for a home link, and it was in Deer Park. I didn't know where Deer Park was, but it was unusual to have a teaching opening at that time of year. So I applied. I had to drive it up here because I did not have it finished in time. But when I turned it in, the person that accepted it said, "So is this an application for HomeLink?" I said, "It is." And she said, "Well, I guess they're looking for someone who could teach science and maybe weightlifting." And I said, my background's in English and writing and that type of thing. And she said, "Oh, listen, just give it to me. I don't really think they know what they want." Now, I say that with good humor because, in fact, they hired someone who did not have a connection with science and weightlifting, but it was, I don't want to prolong it, but it was a wonderful interview with a parent. Charlene Steverding was a parent in the program, and Bob Griffin was the head of special ed, and he'd also been given this extra hat of, "You're going to do this HomeLink program too." And Carol, and it was fruitful, I think. The questions they asked, I could be pretty honest about.
Yep.
But then I could offer some ideas that I just, gifted ed is something where there's a lot of sort of creative problem solving involved. So anyway, was hired. A salient remark was Bob Griffin took me aside and said, listen, I'm not sure Carol knows exactly what she needs, but your job is to make life easier for her. She has too much on her plate.
I heard that when I got hired too. No, I'm just kidding. They can't see your facial expressions, just for the record. No, one thing that she said in the last story, that she's like, when they interviewed you, it's like she doesn't check any of the boxes, but we need her. She's exactly who we need. So that was like, that echoes exactly what she was saying.
Well, thanks, Carol. Anyway, it was a year of such transition. The program was moving to the building that they now still operate through. It was the old elementary. They were moving out of the doctor's office, right, Carol?
Right.
And so she was going from a very small group of rooms to now a school that had, well, Carol, you help me. Every room was filled with storage things.
Yes, it was been abandoned. They didn't know what to do with the building. You know, it was not worthy of anything. So
Well,
they hired us.
They did, and everyone it was all hands on deck just to move things, to literally create space, a place for parents, very important to Carol, a place for parents to be able to sit and wait and gather and be near their kids, needed classrooms, but all of that was sort of an unearthing of, what do you do with this stuff? What do you do with that? Where were they going to put me, for instance? And I, for a while, I was in the library, kind of in a cubby hole in the back that worked just fine. And every day was a wonderfully unpredictable, long day, but there was lots of joy in it, and it was action. There was no sitting. You needed, what I could bring was a bit of energy, and I would say that came in handy, for me anyway.
How much was a bit?
We went nonstop.
Nonstop. Carol and I, well, this is part of the glorious stuff.
Yeah, we should probably share some of this, but
well,
here so late at night.
We were here till 11 at night.
Night after night.
No kidding. And I think our husbands were bemused, but they accepted. And I had an hour's drive home, and Carol lived a little closer. But we totally enjoyed those hours. But you're kind of, Carol had somebody, I think, when I came along, that she could run ideas through. Because, again, this whole concept was new to me, but I was drawn in. I was fascinated and delighted, and just fell in love with Carol and who she was. She's a great raconteur. She tells stories like nobody. And I wanted to know about the people. And she would mention, everything in Homeschooling is people connected. It's this family, and then it's another family that they know, and so forth. And to say something kind of serious, I just heard myself say it. Homelink is made up of stories. And what I found was that every family story was so interesting, and it was unlike others. And it's unique. It's your story. Your story, Stefan, is unique to you, and it makes you who you are. It's vital. It's important. And as you listen to those stories, and you begin to see the other people that they know, it might be from church, might be, a cousin, might be a neighbor. But I realized that I think this is how a community is built. This is how a culture is formed. We all have stories. We all have things that are important to us. And as those start to link up, and as you care enough about those people, you remember the details, and you remember why this kind of class would be important to the students, and so forth. It mushrooms into kind of a caring, throbbing, what can we do for one another? And I think both Carol and I had that sense that we wanted to serve. we wanted to do what we could for these families that we treasured. I mean, I did a deep dive and I loved every bit of it. And so that first year was a lot of getting to know you, getting to know the program, getting to know Carol, getting to know the ins and outs of an alternative ed world, and trying to establish this building. But the rewards were mighty. And I'm sure Carol mentioned before, but she went from 36 students to 100 to 200, which is when a number of us were hired. Pretty soon it was 350 and then 500. And I mean, in no time, it was 500. And the then superintendent just said, wasn't that Mick Miller at that point?
Might have been Mick. I'm not sure.
Just said, you know what?
Enough.
We have to have a ceiling here.
Yeah.
Because we were outgrowing this building, Stephan. And Carol's got famous statements I have always loved through the years, but it was easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. And when it came to claiming a room for our needs, it happened. And everything got ushered out and, sort of like a big flag is put in it. This will be the science room.
I was going to say, is that when the circus tent got erected? That's our gym.
Yeah, probably could be. Anyway, those first years were just a busy delight of knowing the territory while new territory is being garnered, and so it was marvelous. And did you mention, Carol, before? Did you mention about Clayton?
Did I talk about Clayton?
Just when it entered and
it came
the
in.
story.
That's about 04, wasn't it?
Yes, and that was a major thing because
was
it
huge.
was probably very much a God-given happening for us. And once that, Carol's given you the background of that, but once we now had this building, and of course it had to be gutted and it had to be completely transformed. Carol and I were getting our administrative credits, and one of the things that we did, one of the projects, was that we became change agents. That was the task. What can you be a change agent for? Was a big project for a class. So we had Mike videoed us, and we had on trench coats, and we had on a big little marker on our coats that said change agents, and we had hats, and we had the Mission Impossible music in the background, and we took people through the Clayton School, which had been it had just been abandoned
30 years.
30 years worth of excess that the district didn't know what to do with. Well, we'll put it up at Clayton. And it was things from ECAP, so it's things for little children. It's, the bathrooms, Carol,
fixtures were on the floor. The light fixtures were on the floor, as was all the plaster. Because it was a 1915 building.
Yes.
And it had been sitting vacant for 30 years and mothballed, and the rats had taken it over.
Oh, all vermin had found a home.
And looking at it now, that'd be hard to imagine because that place is
so bad,
so good right now.
One room was nothing but thrown away textbooks. I mean, halfway up the wall, moldy old textbooks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And curious things. It was interesting to see how 30 years before they had a big curtain that divided a classroom from the room where band was held on the second floor. Do you remember that? You just think, how did that work?
Right. It was a wooden folding door, and they would open it up, and then those two rooms became the stage and an auditorium when needed.
Yeah.
It was
clever.
I wanted to save it. They wouldn't let me keep the door.
Anyway, that's a mighty thing in the program, in that we now, once the developers, the construction, once that happened and the building came to life in about a year's time, Carol, was it?
Right. They worked on it over the summer, and we were in it in the fall. We started the fall because we spent the entire summer trying to come up with a schedule that would incorporate two
I do
buildings.
remember
that? Yeah, we spent the entire summer
with whiteboards.
We were up in the computer lab up there. The building was finished. We now had to figure out how we're going to do two buildings with this amount of people. How we're going to get the kids back and forth. Did they have to all be at one building all day? How was that going to work? And we came to the conclusion that every kid had to be able to access the main building, which had the better facilities as far as versatile space like the gym and more classroom space and all these things. We had a weight room, we had a dance room. Everybody had to have access to those specialty spaces. So we had to come up with a schedule that would meet that. And we spent the entire summer, June, we developed a schedule. Well, first of all, parents told us they would not put their children on a school bus ever. Homeschoolers don't ride school buses. Everybody knew that.
And their kids had to all be together. You have large families.
Right. And my older kids must be with the younger children at all times. My older students must be with my littles, and they must be there with them. And so we tried in June to make a schedule that would meet those qualifications for parents and handed it to a group of parents for their okay, and they said absolutely not. So we went and spent July up in the same computer lab, Kayleen, Carrie, you and I, and we did it a second time and tried again. And again, they said, nix, no go. And we realized it is impossible with the configuration of the different, the Deer Park site has so many more rooms than the Clayton site. It was an impossibility. We finally said, we hate to tell you this, but you're going to have to ride a school bus. And so we got permission. Two 60-passenger buses at noon would transport kids during the lunch hour. That's why we have an hour lunch break. And we thought, the parents are just going to be so angry.
Well, and those buses would pick the kids up at the end of the day, Carol, and take them back.
So we had to get permission with the transportation. And so we made a schedule that we thought would work, which is one reason we have our sixth graders with the older kids, which we know wasn't necessarily the best, but just because of sheer numbers that split the numbers the best. And then we thought, parents aren't going to go for it because we've done all the things they didn't want. We have school buses now, and their kids aren't all together all day. They were fine.
They were.
And the first day where those buses lined up down here to pick up those kids, we had mothers there with these video cameras on their shoulders, big video cameras, videoing their children getting on a school bus for the very first time in their lives. Quickly, as soon as the kids were on the bus, the mothers jumped in their cars and beat them up to Clayton so they could be there to video getting off the bus.
More evidence than actual memories.
Suburbans and trucks. Just an entire fleet.
It was so funny. All these Suburbans, everybody had a Suburban, and they would dash up there and beat that 6 miles up to Clayton so they could video them at the other end. And when Clayton came on board in 2004, it was like a whole new era for Homelink opened up.
2005.
Oh, was it 2005?
It was 2005.
So it was built over the summer and opened in 2005.
When we had the grand opening, the ribbon cutting, you remember professors that we had at Eastern Washington came.
Oh, they did?
Yes, they saw it, and some of the teachers, the women that had taught in that building in the 60s came, and they were elderly. There were a couple of them. So it was a delightful thing.
Do you remember, Molly, us asking those two gals who were probably in their 80s, who came to see what the new building looked like? I know what you're going to say. And I said, I was so worried they wouldn't like what we had done, because they had taught there, 50, 60 years ago, whatever. And I said, is it okay? What do you think? Honey, is it okay? It's warm. You have central heat. They were delighted. It was just such an upgrade. We had air conditioning and heat, and they had a coal furnace that the kids had to shovel coal in the basement. They thought we'd done a great job, and it relieved me that we had tried to keep it so. And the district was great. They put out an awful lot of money for some beautiful woodwork trim to keep the craftsman style, which cost a lot of money, all that wood, and tried to keep that original. And we put on the historical registry and all that. So it has been a gem for this program.
It's a little plum to the program.
I love Clayton.
Yeah, well, we all do. And you might know, Stephan, that's where I was for
a long time.
7 years. 7 years. That's where I was. And I did love it.
It's hard not to love it.
Who would not just, it was just, I always told people it felt like something from the 50s. Homeschooling is a more old-fashioned in many ways. way of educating and keeping the family together and so forth. And you walk into Clayton and you just feel like that's a school that is very emblematic of that time also. And so it was just
so special. One thing about Clayton I always loved when I was up there was when you do that lunch bus transfer thing. And even though our older children aren't with our little kids, when that bus comes and say the little kids are lined up to get on the bus and the big kids are coming off, the siblings go towards each other with big hugs. I would watch that and you just, where in the world do you see this?
Yeah.
Where so often in traditional ed, you are with kids who are born within the same 12 months you were, and the fifth graders don't mingle with the fourth graders. There's a real division. Here there was, the older kids come off the bus, the little kids run up and give them big hugs.
High fives
It's
galore.
such a community and still had that family feel, even though they were on buses and not together all day. It's been a blessing, I will say, Clayton.
Well, I don't get to see that because I'm down here and we're
Right.
always loading and then unloading. So, yeah, I miss that.
It is this great connection when they're unloading and loading back up. There's just a real neat passing time there that is very special.
Yeah. And it was just a total compliment to the program to have something that was just sweet and unlike really any school you would go in, and then more the business part of the program. It was always down here, and you need that. That's vital to sustaining a program and so forth. But Clayton was always just It was, I'll use Carol's word, it was a gem of a place to be and for kids to be. I think they really enjoyed it. And Stefan, I don't know if they still do, but at the end of the day, it was not at all uncommon for people to come by on their horse to pick up a third grader, to pick up a kindergartner. You'd have, excuse me, but poo-poo, you'd have to walk around.
I'll bleep that later.
As kids were getting on the bus, but it oozed charm.
It oozed. Or, the snakes we'd find. It was just, it had that old-fashioned country, homey
turkeys
feel.
that get loose and take over.
Oh, the geese that attacked them. Remember? Attack of the Geese? They kind of the neighbors had geese, and they would come over to in front of our school and mess all over the place. We would have to clean goose poop up off the sidewalk before kids got there. So I should tell a story. One of our teachers, which one was it? She was, was it?
Is this the lambs?
No, anyway, I'll remember the name. It'll come tomorrow. Anyway, so she had planted bulbs in the fall, and come spring, we were so excited for those flowers to come up. So we're out checking to see if the flowers are up outside in the front yard. And so it's early spring, and I think the tulips are just coming up. So she takes all her little K through 2s down the stairs and goes outside to check on tulips. Well, it's still spring, and it's wet, and it's kind of muddy and slippery. And there's a lot of goose poop everywhere. And all of a sudden, all the geese come from the neighbors and come and attack our group of kiddos and this poor teacher. And the picture, it's a good thing she wasn't hurt, but her arms are flailing. She's running backwards from the geese. Her feet slip out from under her. Feet and arms go up in the air. She comes down pretty heavy. And you're all cleaning up everything, and we get all inside and we get cleaned up. And then the kids sit down to draw a picture of their experience. I was going to save that picture. It was classic. One of those little kiddos had drawn the best picture of this teacher. Arms and legs in the air, coming down, geese flying everywhere.
Chaos at Clayton.
But that was just the way life was up there, and she wasn't hurt, and I'm very grateful. But she could have been. Yeah, it's just a fun place to be.
Yeah,
I love it.
It still is.
So, from a parent's perspective, 2025 is when we're recording this. Whew, this might be listened to in the next year. Who knows? So you talked about community. You talked about stories. Is that still the case nowadays, even if we've gotten so big?
Well, So I'm taking a guess. I'm close to 2 years.
So this is old information.
But Carol started something. So I'm going to laud Carol, like always. Carol started something that I think was really valuable, and that is, so we had these waiting lists. We had people that wanted to come in. We're so delighted that people were interested in us. Carol always felt like she wanted to have a one-on-one with any mother coming in, usually moms, could be with the kids, and so that you get to know them, and so that Carol, who had a real good sense about fit, could tell if this family maybe were they going to enjoy HomeLink, or in fact maybe there would be somewhere else that might be a little better. That sounds punitive. It's not. It's just, you need to have a good
the reality of the situation.
Good horse sense. So Carol would know the people as they came in. And years later, when I started doing this, we were big, and we did have such a waiting list. And once again, people would say, why don't you just do an orientation and have just people come in, and if they like it, they sign up so we did do orientations. We did have this group of 20 moms come in, but never did we not do the individual, because it's just, for one thing, it's delight to meet the people. Mm-hmm. They hear their story. Where I'm going is, if you are able to maintain those stories, mm-hmm. then the richness of, even with new people, who they are, what brings them to us, what are their kids like, who are they going to enjoy being with? Do we have, like I said before, a class that's going to be perfect? We do have piano. Okay, take piano. But though it becomes more complex in people and backgrounds, you can keep track of them. And so, yes, I think the stories are still prevalent, and I think that what different people bring to the program and how it enlivens us, and it's a refresh to have new folks in. And then Carol and I think we both felt, on a long day, maybe on a hard day, the best thing you could do is get around a new mother, because she will be over the top excited. This will be the best thing she has ever run into. She didn't know such a place existed. I can't believe my kids are so happy. And you just lap it up, because mm-hmm. At the end of the day, that's what you need, that little encouragement. Yeah. But I think that if people, because we have any number of consultants and they know their families well, if we can keep that network of who are these folks, and do they know these folks, and so that people belong. I just think that's a core human desire, is to belong. Mm-hmm. And this is a great place to belong to, but I think so much of it is made up of folks knowing one another, mm-hmm. and others introducing and making sure that in a classroom the kids know each other. And certainly in a mother's room, people know each other, but also that parents that can't always come in, there needs to be a way to make them feel like they too are part of things, are important. You put out memos, I think you have something different now, Tuesday Telegraph, but it's more than just information. It's communication, not just information. You're communicating the importance that they know this, and that maybe they will come and make us better by attending an event or by sharing in what's going on. So that was long-winded, but honestly, I think that's core to HomeLink, is that it keeps the stories and the people who, the human element stays mm-hmm. vital. Yeah. The relationships are there. I
think you'll be happy to know that Gretchen's still doing the interviews, and she talks about how even while they're talking, she's like, all right, what consultant would be best for this person? And so you're already, she's thinking about all right, where's the good consultant? What's a good fit? Where is this going to end? As I'm getting new families that are new to the program, sometimes it takes a little while to get their feet under them. Like, well, here's some default curriculum or whatever. But mm-hmm. then as they're like, well, that doesn't work for us. Oh, great. Let's figure out what does work. And, mm-hmm. Just trying to help them with their homeschooling story. And even, especially if they have youngers, they've got lots of time to figure out what works and what doesn't. And yeah, you get people that love curriculum, and then I'll recommend it to a different family and they'll absolutely hate it. And so it's,
Stephan, have you thought about the fact that we, as we're talking about people's stories, your story, Carol's story, my story, but because it's sort of a close-knit group of staff, you become part of their story, and by golly, they all become part of yours. And that there is the blessing in that is certainly that stayed with me all the years I was here, and certainly has continued on, is that you've shared key things for years with people you so love, and they're part of your story. People here, part of mine, and they've always welcomed us at weddings and get-togethers and whatnot, because they'll regard you as you're their consultant. You're the person overseeing some things with their kids, their beloved kids. You matter. What you say matters. What you suggest matters. I mean, it's beautiful.
No pressure.
Well, it's all about relationships, community and relationships, and that trust element of being able, like Gretchen, trying to decide who's the best consultant, the best fit. And so you want to get it so that these are people who jive, and that there's a mutual trust.
Yes.
So that the people can trust that consultant with their advice, and that consultant can trust the parent. And so it really is built on mutual respect and trust, and the relationships where you just become like a big family. It's like a community that's because of the trust, and you have the same goal. We're here to support them to do the best they can, because if they're not supported, the students, their children won't be able to learn, right? So I've always thought, yes, we're here for the students, but we get to the students by supporting those who are doing the homeschooling, because if they're not supported and guided well, then it's not going to happen at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of the commonalities, Stephan, through the years is that when it comes right down to it, so many of the moms will feel like they're just not enough. They're just not, they really weren't made for this, whatever. There's, it's hard, and you get worn out. And so if that consultant, if the program itself can shore up that parent to do this great work of homeschooling, it'd be very easy for this to die out a little bit, because it's not easy. Or to find variations of it that really, where the parent and student, maybe some of the interaction is not as positive or fruitful. And so all of us were in kind of a support role, whether we were a consultant or we were administering or whatever, to just make this community feel as though, yes, they matter, but we'll figure this out. Let's figure this out together, but not to get discouraged.
Yeah. I think because my son is through the Mead program, don't judge, we're closer. And we got introduced to the Mead program 2 years prior to me learning about Deer Park as well.
Sure.
But that practice of, being with my family, her figuring out homeschool, and like every May for a couple of years, she's like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I was like, no teacher wants to be a teacher in May. Just for the record, like we're all trying to figure out what else we can do at the end of the school year. So you're not alone. No decisions in May, but obviously I'll support whatever. Obviously I'll support whatever you want. But no, it's just figuring out, like I don't know, like it's a matter of trust between like me and Corey, or Corey and me, about, do you, if I didn't think you were doing a good job, do you trust me enough to tell you? And like Riker's doing great. And so I have there's no complaints. You might have an odd day, a bad week, but we're happy. And it's not always about the test scores or about the numbers. In fact, it rarely is, but that's a helpful indicator sometimes. But no, I think that working with Corey and that for a few years, it was helpful to me to okay, this is a very similar situation when I'm talking to a parent of one of my families here.
Well, it's personal to you.
Yeah.
And then the beauty of that is when you're working with other families, you have that personal connect of your own, and you know why it so matters. Well, what you might say, and you're gentle, I'm sure, and just
when I have to be.
But to emphasize Carol's word, trust, the great hope is through the relational piece of the program, that there is an enormous amount of trust, and that is its own encouragement also.
When getting new families has some, different challenges of its own, but I think it was harder to get Rod's people that, he retired last year and I got some of his people and their families and they had a way of doing stuff.
Sure.
And so, well, Rod did it this way and Rod let us do this. And Rod is like, that's good. It's like, I'm not Rod though. And I will try to do it. I'll have as much grace as I can with whatever we're doing and stuff. So
transitions.
Always.
They're never easy.
He gave me 2 seniors and I was like, I got to graduate too. Rod will come back and kick my butt if I don't graduate the 2 seniors he gave me.
Well, if they were boys, yes.
So thinking about parents, what makes a successful parent here?
You looking at me?
Well, you're the one who traveled the farthest.
Well, I would say, for so many people, homeschooling comes from within. And if they are very spiritually based, they may very well feel that the Lord has said, these are your children to raise and to educate. And so for some, I think it is really, truly something felt within. That's a great motivator. And it's also somewhere you can lean back on hard days. It would be best, I think, if the parent's not working. I would never want to offend someone with that statement. Mm-hmm. But I think through the years, we've seen that, especially if it's younger kids, the parent needs to be present with the kiddos. We're sort of a believer, and we had some classes in something that was from Mark's program, and that is that ideally a parent goes through 3 phases. When the kids are little, the parent is very present as a teacher, very much, probably sitting next to the girl or a boy, and if there are a lot of them, then they're all around Carol's kitchen table. But there is one-on-one instruction, encouragement, and hopefully, it's a productive thing. When they get to be more middle school age, the parent, if possible, pulls back and becomes more of a coach. Because at that point, with those ages, kids don't like parents hovering, and of course they know so much. But the wisdom is, at this, you're wanting to develop independent learners. I mean, I would say that's in my mind, that would be a principle for homeschooling parents. What you want are independent learners. Certainly not kids that need to be told every step. So after those formative years of maybe one-on-one homeschooling, then you're the coach. Hopefully they have learned enough. Their toolbox is full of good approaches and of some wisdom. And if it's math, they know how to do certain kinds of problems. Now they do it more on their own, and they come to you for, correction, ideas, validation. But you are sort of allowing them to be, to have some independence at a time where I think they want it. And then high school years, the parent is more a mentor as we're really moving towards being independent, an independent learner. And now, not that they can teach themselves chemistry, but there are good programs for that. And of course, if they're here and they want to take it through the academic track, that's perfect. But if not, there are good methods and curriculum for that. Sometimes the parent, we've had a couple, well, more than a couple, but there have been a number of families that have very unusual kids. Mm-hmm. And they reach that high school level. And I can think of one mom in particular. Her job was to find someone in the community that could literally be a mentor to her son, because he was very advanced and he had great loves, great passions in certain things. And she found a retired professor from Whitworth, and that link was extremely positive and good. But anyway, I think you could look at homeschooling that way if there's a model that is needed. But I think I'd pull back and say whatever floats the boat of the family, the emphasis should be on being able to be an independent thinker and to be able to think critically about information and to be able to siphon through and see the truth of whatever you're reading or learning. But those are then kids that are ready to go out and go to college and handle themselves because they can do it. Or if they aren't going to school, they can join the workforce and they'll be there, they'll be on time, they'll learn what they need. There's a maturity.
Well, I would even say, if I can add to that, there's a difference between raising an independent learner and parents backing off. Because I've seen at River Homelink and different things, when kids get to the middle school, high school, they're like, I can't teach that class, therefore I'm not responsible for that. Or they'll say like, nope, we need an academic class because I don't like. It's like, no, you're just, your role is changing. That in education, the guide on the side, we would say that or something. But yeah, you like, I can't do that, therefore I need you to take that. Like, no, you're still in control of the course. You're still in control of the education.
You're still homeschooling.
Yeah. So you're not giving that up. And maybe that, I don't know what our numbers are with people, go in high school, they start switching, or, we have academic classes, but yeah, the parent is still responsible to make sure the coursework gets done at home. Monthly progress review is, that they are still checked into what is happening.
Yes.
And not checking out thinking someone else is taking care of that. Because just in the same reason that you homeschool, you still want to know and be involved. The book that Nancy Furtick. Margot
Long's at Whitworth.
Yeah, Whitworth. Yeah, shows those different names. The book Hold On to Your Kids. And that was a River Homelink. Like, they struggled getting parents into the classrooms, coming, no, we're not taking over your education, your homeschool experience. This is your responsibility that we're here to help you with. But it's a different role.
Stefan, as I was listening to you, I think that is one of the differences or it used to be, Carol, differences in programs around the state. If what parents want is a nice culture for their kids, but they either don't have time or they're feeling they would be insufficient. They couldn't do the homeschooling. There are programs that have that they take over. I think Meade used to be that. They'll kind of take over the educating a little, and but the parent has some responsibility to make sure homework gets done, and kids don't always go every day. But I used to think this program was much more of a hands-on, and we were not looking for ways to make it easier for a parent. We'd help all we could, but now and then, Carol, we'd run into parents that their kids got through 8th grade and now the parent was going out to work. And the problem with that was they presumed that they could take the academic track classes, their son or daughter could, and that Homelink's in charge of those high school years. And that was never, ever Carol's vision, nor what to me seemed wise at all to do. So I can remember having in orientations in the fall, parents would come back, kids would come back, and I felt like I was on a soapbox, but just saying, don't let go of those reins. Yeah. Allow someone else to do some of it, but these are your kids. And in this program, this is still a parent partnership. You are still the parent in this partnership, and we need you to fill that role and not sort of back off and go on to other things that student still needs your involvement. It's still up to you to see how they're doing in that class and to alert us if there's a real struggle so we can help you get a tutor maybe, or we can make another arrangement. But those are the testy things about the high school years, is that parents do oftentimes just feel like they're sort of floating alongside without too much that's tethering them to the actual education that's supposed to be happening.
Still important to be a part of that, though.
Well, yeah.
Especially like the interviews are super important there, especially if you're getting students that are like transferring from other schools. Like, why are you coming here? What are you hoping to be different? Like at River Home Link, I remember students like, we got bullied at the other school, so we're going to try here because we've heard good things. It's like, like there are good things here, but that doesn't make it successful. There's got to be there has to be a partner.
Buy-in.
Yeah.
Tremendous buy-in.
And you have to realize how
parents.
much work it is for everybody.
Yeah. It's just a glorious way of educating and of doing life, but it should be a little exhausting because you're throwing a lot of yourself into it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anything to add? You've been awfully quiet.
No, it's great. Nothing to add.
Well, I will add this, and Carol can talk about it, but when there was a transition and Carol actually sat in the same consultant seat that I'd been in for years at Clayton, and I moved to her seat, to the principalship, I knew that it was vital that we stick to our moorings. It was always my little line to myself. Carol had done a marvelous job in steering this program and in defining the ways it would operate. And I'd sure been a part of it. I knew it well, but I did not want that change to in any way take our eyes off of what had been successful and really who the program was and the culture that expected it. And one of those moorings I felt was what happened with the high school years. And I don't know if you want to tell, we were a K-8 program, really. You know, when we started, I mean, we had high schoolers, but most of our classes were K-8. And then,
well, it was mostly enrichment classes, is what it was, until the parents insisted. I'll never forget, because that was never the intent. The intent was, I'd always said, we'll do the messy stuff here. We'll do pottery, and we'll do glue, and we'll do all this stuff
Sprinkles.
that your mothers don't want to do at home. And you guys take care of reading, writing, and math, and we'll do all the fun stuff. And that worked. And then we went that way till about the fourth year maybe. And then parents in mass came to us and had a meeting. We can't teach algebra.
It's always math's fault.
Teach algebra.
It's always
and
math's
they
fault.
were insistent that we pick up the upper level math. And I had never wanted to go into the academic part. It was going to be more the other. But guess what? We decided they needed math. If they need math and they need help in math. And luckily, we had Roy Wood, who had been with us from the get-go, really. And he was a retired math teacher from the other side of the state. And he had retired, come over here and put his kids in the program. And instantly we put him to work. And he was great. And he is still with us to this day. And his heart and his demeanor are perfect for HomeLink. So if we had a math-anxious child who was afraid to go into a math class in a traditional setting and sit in a classroom, Roy was safe. And I could say, you go sit in Roy's class and you'll be fine and you will learn math. And Roy was our transitional person into academic classes. And he loves being here. We love having him. I don't think he'll ever leave. He will die in the saddle. And
hopefully not on the clock.
He will be in Clayton because he loves being here. And the kids, I told him here a year ago, or first of this year maybe, Roy, he was here at the beginning. He had my daughter. He's had my grandchildren. He's put my grandchildren through math. I says, you stay just a little bit longer and you'll have the great grandkids.
Oh, boy.
And that's true. They're coming up. And I thought, And that was our transition into academic classes. After we added math, of course, then it became science. And the next thing
Carol
you know, it just kept going.
I mean, it was English.
Yeah.
And it was science. They didn't want to teach
things the parents didn't feel comfortable doing.
Yeah.
So is that part of that transition problem, or do you think it's just inevitable that that families need the support for those upper level classes?
Well, they do need the support without question. But as I was listening to Carol, in the early years, and there were a lot of families in the early years, but it did mushroom. But in the early years, it seems like a lot of the families here were very traditionally minded in terms of traditional homeschooling, where the parent, like Carol, homeschooled her kids through high school. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, we stop at 9th grade. That's not easy, but, you did that. And I think that was part of her mentality, as these parents said, we must have this. And she'd kind of, I'm not going to say she'd stomp her foot, but the idea was, no, that's not what we are. You are the homeschool parent. We're going to help you in all ways, but you can do this. You can, and she preached it, but at the same time, it was a big mass. And so what I remember is we worked hard to figure out, well, what do we offer? If we do this, Carol would say kicking and screaming. She went into the academic track kind of offerings. But what do we do? So we had one class of English. We had one class. It was sort of composition. We had one because parents didn't feel like they could teach writing well. So it was one class of composition and one of biology. I'm sure it was biology, Carol, and then an algebra. By the end of the first week, we had added another class of English and science and I don't want to say a remedial, but it was a different math, or maybe it was another section of algebra. But the desire for it blew us away. It was sort of like, we can only have so many kids in the 15. That's for fire code. In this old building, we could only take 15. Well, they were beating down the doors. So anyway, we did go into that dark night and had academic track. And then we've certainly, it's a burgeoning area still.
Yeah.
But I did feel, because I knew Carol felt this way, that we are not going to be another alt-ed high school. We are not going to have classes 5 days a week. We are not going to offer everything you need for graduation. Carol always said, moms can teach history. Moms really can do English, but they can certainly do history. There are classes that lend themselves to that kind of old homeschool model, and you can teach it at different levels and so forth. So we kind of just gently went into it, wouldn't you say, Carol?
I think, we try to meet the needs of the people. And if the people come and say, we need algebra, they need algebra.
Yeah.
So you try to meet that and try to keep that balance. But always, parents know they don't have to take algebra with us.
No.
You have that option. You could go hire a tutor if you'd rather, if you really can't do it and you'd rather do that. Or you can do it yourself. And there's nowadays, of course, it wasn't that way then, but there's all this online.
And there's the high school.
So it's totally changed. That really changed things when all of a sudden you put your kid in front of a computer, which more and more people are doing, and they're doing all their things on a computer, their math, their whatever, and mothers find themselves doing less and less. I'm not always thinking that's the best way, because then you lose that connection. And again, it's very easy as a busy mother, especially if you have a rather large family, which a lot of our people have very large families.
Yeah.
I mean, there are only so many hours in a day, so it's really easy to put an older child in front of a screen. It really is. But that's
and
something every
child,
family
too.
has to come to terms with on their own, really. That's where we need to step back and say, those are family decisions. This is what we can do. Here's what we can't do at this point. Maybe that'll change someday. But right now, here's what we offer.
Yeah, but curriculum has opened the doors for a lot of things. A ton of options. DVDs, online videos. Yeah, math online is not my favorite, but if that's what works best or that's what's easiest.
Well, I think the smartest thing that ever, I was so relieved when Saxon Math finally had DVDs that helped explain the next concept.
Or Nicole the math lady. Like, that's a whole separate person that's like, I'm going to make my own videos for this.
Right, because we need help here.
Yeah.
You know, there's a little gap, and I'm going to fill it. But so, yeah, the whole technology has totally changed the face of education in all over the world, including HomeLink.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And you. It's been great.
What would you say? So we talked like a lot of middle school, high school, kind of the transition. What makes the first few years as a homeschooler the most successful? Or what would you say, like some tips and tricks of, like, you know, someone's just coming into homeschool, maybe they have a kindergartner, maybe they tried public school and they're saying like, yeah, this doesn't work for us. What's the mindset that they need to come to the first year or two as a homeschooler?
Well, one thing would be to be ever mindful of the fact that the most primary relationship is the mother-child, mother and daughter, mother and son. That's way more important than homeschooling mother and son or daughter. So you want that to always remain the vital relationship that it is. If homeschooling can fit under that comfortably, great. Oh, that's fantastic. But don't sacrifice. So, my own example.
Don't be the teacher at the sacrifice of the mom.
Yeah, and the relationship. Mm-hmm. So I think something that happens pretty commonly, it used to anyway, I imagine it still is let's take math. And you have somebody that's a little math resistant, or really they're struggling. And that mother is working again on this problem or this approach or whatever. I would just say, don't let the importance of that son or daughter learning that skill come at the expense of that son knowing that his mother loves him no matter what. And I used to, with my daughter, I got so excited about this program and what I was learning and the thrilling things that were here. We have 4 children, 2 of our children homeschooled. My oldest daughter right through high school, and my second daughter, she has someone going into high school next year. Anyway, I know from my older daughter that when that clash started again, she'd say, hey, let's close this for today, okay? Go grab a book. Let's see what's happening in whatever book it was. But there'd be something that put him right next to her, and they would feast on that. Or it would be, let's get a brownie. Let's get it, with boys, it's food is a nice companion to anything. But I'm just saying, I saw from her that you don't sacrifice that relationship, that loving relationship. That is the most important thing. The homeschooling piece, fantastic, but don't have casualties. I would say for younger kids, that's pretty. There'll be clashes in middle school and high school, but those younger kids need to feel very, very confident of the fact that their mother loves them and loves for this to be happening, and it can work. But on bad days, if there are tears and so forth, we'll move on to something else.
Well, and I think one of the bravest things you can do is when you realize that sacrifice is happening, and you said, like, no, we have to go back to a regular school. I can't be the teacher. Like, yes, you don't want to give up right away, or yes, there are things you can try, but to realize that it's like, no, I need to go back to mom. I've had a couple families that have made that transition, and just like, that's good to know. And that's like, homeschooling is important, but like you're saying, it's not the most important.
It should never be the most important, but it can sure be done together and in sync. But I think there's wisdom in knowing when you've reached, and Carol did all this homeschooling herself. You could speak far better to that.
Yeah, there's so many things about it. When I started, I kind of jumped in with both feet. So when we began, I had a student at every grade level. Gina was a junior the year we started homeschooling. And Anna was like 4. And then I had the 4 boys in the middle. Every 2 years there was a boy. And I felt so overwhelmed. I did not have a clue how I was going to pull this off. I had one who wasn't reading yet. I had one who had been in drill team at the high school and was having a great time at the high school. And we decided we're all coming home to do this together. So to sweeten the pot for Gina, we bought her an old car and gave her a little freedom and hooked her up with a friend. And that mother basically took over the homeschooling with her kid and my daughter. And they went, and we basically did a correspondence course for those last 2 years. I didn't even try that. And then I focused on the others. And that youngest one at 4, I was just so concerned she'd never learn to read. At least the others were already reading. No, take it back. Michael wasn't reading yet. He knew his alphabet, but he didn't. But I was so afraid I wouldn't know how to teach him to read that we didn't do math for a year because I was busy doing the reading. So there was so much learning there. At the end, I thought, if you can teach somebody to read, you can do anything. I just thought, I really think if you can teach someone to read, you can do anything. So that was a real learning experience for me. And what I learned was you have to have a schedule. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a schedule, you're doomed from the time breakfast is over. You have got to have a schedule. So the summer before I launched into homeschooling, I was at the library checking out any book on homeschooling they happened to have, which wasn't that many.
Can you imagine the difference between then and today?
Mm-hmm. I was at the library, and I was at the library all the time. They, retired librarians remember my name. I was there all the time, reading everything about homeschooling. And once a week, we went to the library, and kids checked out books, and we brought home 20 books every week. And at one point, I can't remember what holiday it was, I had checked out every book in the local library for my kids. Well, little did I know that the public school teachers used the library too, and I would never leave anything for them. They would come in to do whatever the holiday was, Columbus Day. There was not a book in the library about Columbus Day because I had a...
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. But it was that I had found this book in the library. I'll never forget it. And it talked about the importance of schedule, and it gave you ways of doing it. And I studied that book, and I made charts, and we had schedules, and we had routines so that you were up at a certain time. We ate breakfast at a certain time together. This is what happened during breakfast. I would be reading from some great classic that I thought they should all be listening to, whether you were 4 or whether you were a junior. You're going to hear whatever it was I had decided you had to hear. And so we read, and then we always read from the Bible at breakfast. I had an audience that couldn't leave. And then we did chores. And on the chore chart, you knew what you were supposed to be doing. My bathrooms got cleaned every day, top to bottom. It was great. I had the cleanest bathrooms during those years. And I made sure it was rotating. That took some doing so that you never had to do a toilet 2 days in a row. So that you did a sink in the floor or a toilet in the floor, but you never had to do toilets 2 days in a row. So I had it all figured out. And those charts stayed up there. And so you had 30 minutes to do those chores. And those beds were made. And then you did math. Because I knew
what a reward.
If you do math, I just knew the energy level was higher in the morning. And if I waited till later in the day to do math, I wouldn't want to do math. So math came first, and I always knew, this was my thinking, if we can just get through math and the rest of the day goes south, at least we did math and the bathrooms are clean. So it worked. For me, it worked. And that was the system I used for those 10 years. I did that for 10 years before HomeLink started. I just did homeschooling for those 10 years. It worked. It worked. And we had a system that we just knew. And if we did our system, we were done by noon. We were done by noon. Now, at noon, that meant the day was yours as a kid. And the other great thing is we had moved out of town to the country so we wouldn't have neighbors. So we didn't have neighbors to hang with. That was great, too, because who wanted that bad influence, So you're alone, and you're a kid, and you're a boy. So you have to have an interest, something to do. And, the Lord was so good. One kid just wanted to make knives. Great. We got him a forge. For Christmas, he got coal in his stocking. I donated my little hair dryer for a blower, and it got melted. And he had his thing, and Danny got so great at knives, he was selling them at the mall at Northtown. I mean, he is a great knife maker. He learned more from making knives, metallurgy, melting points, different types of metals. We had the whole setup in the basement. He could spend his afternoon making knives till the cows came home. Well, it was Johnny. He just knew from the time he was little he was going to fly. Because, we live in the flight pattern of the Deer Park Airport. And his bedroom faces the airport, and he sees planes going overhead every day.
He said, say.
And he just wants to fly. And so guess what? Everything he read, every child had to have a book of their own they were reading besides the one that I assigned them. You could read, but it had to be approved. Everything Johnny read was about World War II. He's an expert on World War II because it has to do with flying, right? And then technology started developing, and we got a flight simulator. Mm-hmm. And he learned to fly.
That's big.
Right. That was big. The next boy, his interests were odd. I didn't approve, but I had to be supportive. He just wanted to do magic. I said to Nickel, whatever got you going on magic? He said, well, Mom, we always went to the library, remember? And I was into juggling, and next to the juggling books were the magic books. So I read up the magic books, and pretty soon he's pulling rabbits out of hats. Pretty soon we have bunnies. Pretty soon we have doves. You can hear doves in the background when you call my house. There's feathers everywhere. What am I going to do with a kid who likes magic? I said, this is not going to work well. He's going to end up in Hollywood in a sinful place doing magic, which is exactly what happened. He now is part of, the Magician's Castle in L.A., and he's a member of that. And last Christmas, he had to cut his Christmas break with us short because he had a show in Las Vegas.
No kidding.
How dare you?
I look at what I started because I encouraged that. I tried to keep a handle on it. I found 2 elderly magicians in town that were safe. I let him hang out with.
Safe magicians.
I know.
Those are wizards.
But I tried to encourage if I could find their interest. So I guess I always thought, my belief system is, I guess, that God has given everyone a gift.
Yes.
And usually you can find that gift by their interests. What are they interested in? What draws them in? And that usually is connected with their gift in some way. And my job as the mom or as an educator is to support that in any way I can. Not everybody's going to be great at everything. Nobody's going to be great at everything. There's going to be weak areas and strength areas. The strength area is probably the gifting. And instead of doing what we typically do in traditional ed is, if you're really good at reading and you stink at math, well, don't spend any time on reading because you're already good there. Let's just work on math. Poor kids, they're always a failure because they never, ever feel good at it because you're focusing on their weak areas. And then the place where they could shine and feel good and where they're probably going to make their living, you're ignoring because they're already good at that. So I try to reverse that and say, if you're good at this and you love it, what can I do to make it better? How can I help you? And let's get that math up to a marginal spot where you can live and balance your checkbook and do the stuff you have to do in life. And let's get you through Algebra 1. Let's just get you through Algebra 1. And I did get through Algebra 2 with every kid. It was painful. We did it. And it worked. It just worked. So the one odd child that was all about magic is an amazing public speaker. He can read a room. He is now in HR at UCLA, running all 100 clinics.
Does he make problems disappear?
No, he does not.
Sorry, I'll stop now.
He does not. He does everything he can, but he has come to realize some things are just what they are. Between, you name it, politics, location, large or institutions, you do the best you can. But he's kind of come to peace with that. So right now he's finishing up his doctorate at Liberty University in psychology. But I said, psychology, you're going to be ruined. Psychology, Mom, it's okay. And it's a new type of psychology. I think it's called something like corporate psychology or something. It's basically in the workplace. How do you get people to get along? finding the strengths, getting the right people in the right spot, the round pegs and the round holes that we used to think about here when we picked specialists in places. He's very, very good at it. I really do think it comes from all those years of pulling rabbits out of a hat in front of birthday parties for kids.
Well, he performed.
He's a performer.
And so he's comfortable in front of people.
And he's an entertainer. If they'll let him go to some big place in Las Vegas, I go, what? They want you? But he is very good at reading people. He's very good with people. He's got great people skills. I'm not sure the knife maker or the pilot have as great. I know they don't have as good a people skills but the one that I let fly flew for 20 years as a missionary in Mexico in places where people shouldn't be flying. And so each one, really, they've kind of landed in the places, it all
where
turned out that way. So it's fun. That part of it is actually fun when you look at it as this is an adventure. This is an adventure. But to find their strength areas, I would say that's one thing people don't think about as much. What did God give that kid to do? How can I help that grow? And how can I beef up those other areas to the point that they'll be okay? That and having some sort of structure. Now, I was loosey-goosey, really. But we still had enough structure that it worked. So if we could keep our nose to the grindstone till noon, and in the middle of that scheduling, you make sure you do not schedule doctor appointments before noon, ever. Because if you have an appointment before noon, your day is gone, and you're not going to do anything. Because by the time you get home and we'll do it in the afternoon, no, you're not. You are not. Just know if it doesn't happen before noon, it's not going to happen because you're all done, right? Yeah. So I think it's that. So that idea of flexibility. When I first started, I thought I had to mimic the public school schedule. Oh, it's time for recess. Oh, let's go out for recess. That didn't work because they never came back. So we forgot recess. The other thing I learned, don't get on the phone. Do not get on the phone. No cell phones in those days. I had a phone with a really long cord. It had a cord still. But it was really long, so I could get it way around the house. But the kids knew once I got on the phone, I was on the phone for a good hour, and then they disappeared. By the time you got the phone, there was no one to be found. You had to go chase around the countryside hunting for kids.
The day was lost.
And the day was gone. So I learned not to pick up the phone when it rang before noon. So it was just certain things I had to adjust to when you start doing this. It became the priority, but it also, as I look back, it was fun. I had fun. And we had a homeschool community in the area that kind of was good size for our little area. And so we had community that met together once a month. It was nothing formal, but lots of activities. We'd go to the weather station out at the local airway. We go to the airport. We went to court and watched. We just did stuff as groups, as our own little field trips. And for social stuff, my oldest daughter, surprise, surprise, Gina, was in charge of anything social. She and two other high school girls.
That's great.
And those three girls planned dances upon dances. We rented the Beaux-Arts, and we rented the Beaux-Arts, and they learned all the old dances of the medieval area to do at the Beaux-Arts, or we'd rent the local Grange, or we'd go up to the airport where someone owned a hangar and have a box social where the girls had a box and decorated it, and the boys would bid on it, old school stuff.
That's fun.
We had fun. Those were 10 years of great fun. And I think as I look at my kids now, they had a huge impact on my kids and where they are. But so I would say strength, look at their strength area and try to feed that and have a schedule of some sort.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife, and I would suggest that to all the families of making a schedule, making sure you've got a plan so they can see it. Everybody likes knowing what's happening, being able to see it and be like, okay, that's the day. That worked sometimes for my wife and my son, and sometimes she would just make a checklist. You're like, all right, you plan out the day. This is what we need to do. What do you want to do first, second, third? And it all got done. It gets done. So having that ownership sometimes is helpful too if the schedule isn't quite working.
Right.
Just switching
my
it up.
daughter-in-law, who did not want to homeschool, and she was afraid when she married my son she would have to. She did not come from that background at all. Her mother was a school teacher, and she was from the Midwest.
I know. Imagine. Carol always called everything past the Mississippi back east. And I said, you are ignoring, it's a huge swath of the country. See, I don't know anything about it. So anyway,
well,
no.
It was on the other side of Colorado. I didn't know. Yeah. But she did not want to homeschool. And I said, just because you married my son doesn't mean you have to homeschool. But I think she felt like she had to. She came in weeping into Homelink and really, but she has become the best homeschooler I have ever seen.
Really?
And those kids are thriving. And they're now hitting high school age, if you can believe it. Yeah, Emma's about high school, getting close. And so I think it's 9th grade, maybe, having a look at credits. But she has done such a great job. The kids are reading, they're readers. They just do well in all the subjects. But she has a whiteboard, and if it's on the whiteboard, it has to happen. And she's made it fun. Tuesday trash days. Friday floors. The kids do all the housework. They rotate through the week. They help in the kitchen. She's a great cook, and they're in the kitchen with her. But if it's on the whiteboard, it has to happen. Now, does it have to happen in any order? No. But like you said, Stephan, it has to happen. It has to get checked off. So I teach those kids piano. You know, they're my best piano students. Why? Because they practice every day. Because it's on the whiteboard. And so I say to Eli, you're doing so well. You must have really practiced so much. Nope. 15 minutes. I just play each song 3 times. But it's that consistency of it's every day.
Yeah.
It's not 1 hour before your lesson once a week, you know. So it's that a little bit every day, the cumulative progression, you can see that. And they're doing amazing. But here's Liz, who really did not want to homeschool. She went into it kicking and screaming, and her husband, Michael, always says, well, try it. If it doesn't work, fine. And we looked at Northwest Christian, and we did all, you know, but for whatever reason, this has worked so well, and the kids are doing so well. And they have such a healthy community of friends through Homelink. And that's what Homelink has provided for people like that, a healthy community. So now they do things outside of Homelink together as groups, you know. So, and pretty soon you see new connections, and they're in Awanas together, a church together, or you know, up there they have a dance that's a homeschool dance that's not necessarily Homelink, but it's done by a bunch of Homelink kids, and they all find each other, and it's just
it's
fun,
marvelous,
and it's healthy.
That's that burgeoning community, just a wholesome, and it's a culture that everybody.
The latest thing is Jeeping. Now we all Jeep. So everybody's buying Jeeps. So it started with my family. My kid that liked to make knives also likes to fix Jeeps. So now we counted the other day, he has 14 Jeeps.
Oh, good grief.
And only counting the ones that really run or might run soon. But if you take the ones for the whole family, there's like 21 Jeeps now. So we Jeep. But now it's not just the Van Wormers Jeeping. Oh, it's this other homeschool family wants to go on the next Jeep. And now the next one wants to go Jeeping. So next Thursday, we're all going Jeeping. And
you trailblazer.
And it is.
Once again.
So it's just one thing after another. And then pretty soon now we have a little community of Jeeping people. And it's just fun. It
sounds great.
Fun.
This podcast is sponsored by Jeep.
Well, I don't know if you... So the big Jeeping kid, the oldest one who did knives and now does Jeeping, the one with the 14 Jeeps, entered a contest, the Bleeping Jeep contest. And so he has a stepdaughter that he started to homeschool this year through Homelink. And he's incorporating this fixing up of old Jeeps into curriculum. So, because you learn stuff when you fix things, you know. And so she's got a great consultant who will work with him with something very alternative. How can we take fixing up old vehicles and turn that into what did you learn from that, right?
You got reading through your owner's manual. You got math through all the
stuff. And she's learning. I mean, this girl, what is she, 12? You know, transfer case. She can take apart a Jeep, put it back together. She can put the tire on the wheel. She can do all this stuff. So he enters this contest the rule is, and it's from some YouTuber, in Jeeping, your rule is you can't spend more than $5,000 and you have to restore an old Jeep. And so all these contestants entered, and we're only going to pick there's only going to be 4 different groups and 3 from each group. So he entered, but to get chosen, you had to do a video of yourself, and this is what I plan to do, and this is blah, blah, blah. Well, he got chosen. So he and the stepdaughter.
Oh, my.
So Danny and Macy are now in the Bleeping Jeep contest.
She was worried about the magician.
So now you're in the Bleeping Jeep contest, and you have to take an old, unusable Jeep and make it a great Jeep by October. And so that's the rest of this year is going to be fixing up this old Jeep for under $5,000. And then you get to trailer it to Nashville, Tennessee, where we're actually going to judge you. And so that, I thought, what an opportunity. But there again, it's doing what you love to do. And everything is learning, but it's also fun. Yeah. It's also fun.
Wonderful.
And then you have a whole community now of Jeeping people that we get to go Jeep.
Like-minded people.
Right. So anything. I thought, who would have ever thought? But you never know where things will end up. You know.
Really
it's
special.
Fun. It is fun.
All made possible through the flexibility of homeschooling.
Well,
was the ultimate part of that story, right?
Well, the flexibility. You're absolutely right. Talking about the flexibility.
I was trying to bring it back. You reel it back in.
Right, I could reel it back in. Like my son who wanted to fly so badly, and his bedroom window looked at the airport. When he was about 12, and we're half a mile from the airport on a gravel road, and it's time for math, right? Because math comes first, and it's beautiful. It's spring, and it's beautiful, and it's sunny. Who wants to do math? Can I go to the airport? Well, have you done your math? Well, no. But do I have the heart to say you have to do math instead of go to the airport?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
Well, if
she has a schedule. She didn't say you always
did.
But that's the flexibility part that you get to have.
As long as it was done before noon.
If I let you go to the airport, will you promise you'll do your math tonight? Yes. Get out of here. On the bicycle I see him at dinner time, and he'll do his math that night. And because of the flexibility that I could do that would never, ever, he would have never flown. Johnny would have never had a pilot's license had he been in traditional school. But because his mom said, get out of here, and he was an airport rat, he hung at that airport every day. And this great man who had homeschooled, who had been a pilot, a missionary pilot years ago, literally took him under his wing and said, you wash my airplane, I'll give you a ride.
Wow.
And then eventually taught him to fly. And eventually one day, before Johnny was driving, I got a call saying I just cut him loose. And he let him solo in his plane without me knowing about it until he was in the air. And then I ran to the airport to watch him land. Johnny got his pilot's license and got his opportunity to do his dream because of the flexibility of homeschooling. It would have not happened. The idea that we got to live by the airport, which was a miracle in itself, and then when we decided to homeschool, Johnny could just hang at the airport, and it did not do him any harm. It was his career.
Something.
And it is still his career. So today he's working down at Moody, teaching the new bank of young pilots how to fly. That's his job.
Oh, I didn't know he was
he's
at Moody.
He's at Moody, and he's a flight instructor at Moody now because they've come off the field after 20 years there. So, that flexibility, Stefan, is huge. Mm-hmm. The trick is using that flexibility well.
Yes. For good.
Yeah. So when I say, get out of here, that the math really does happen that night. Right?
Yeah. Still got to get through the stuff.
You still have to do it, but there's that flexibility. So I always tell mothers when I was consulting, when grandma's coming out of town for a visit, you can put the books away. It's okay. Make up for it somewhere else. That's the beauty.
Sure. Well, and I think you also get to have a little bit of flexibility on your days, because you can sometimes get stuff done faster than you would be if you were 5 hours in a typical classroom.
Totally.
You get one-on-one time with the teacher. So that math sometimes doesn't math right. You're like, you must work on math 5 hours a day. It's like, no, sometimes you can get it done in 3. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sometimes jealous of all the adventures that my wife and son get to go on. Or we moved to Spokane originally to be close to Corey's parents, and now they get to hang out during the day. Hey, we're going over I'll get texts about we're doing this. Like he's getting a relationship with his grandparents that would have never been nearly as in depth if he was in school full time. And so that flexibility, and again, like the stuff gets done. He was a little bit late reading, but apparently I hear all boys are late on their readings. So, but he's getting caught up, and he's doing great. So, I think she's past the hump of like.
It's scary. It's downright scary when you first start. I really do think it is like hold your breath for the ride and hope I'm not making a huge mistake and all of that. Everyone I think feels that.
Carol used to say, if you can get through the very first year, you're still standing. You made it, and you've gone through so much to know that idea,
what
not
works,
doing
what
that
doesn't.
again. But I used to quote that when people were coming in, because I'd say, just know it's hard, and it's a learning year, and if you get done with it, and you guys are still sweet on each other, and you're still standing, you are so much better prepared for what you'll elect to do the second year. But that first year that's a trial, and it's your heart hurts. Am I doing this right?
Mothers are always so afraid. I think I always said, as a mom, as a homeschool mother, you go around with this big dark cloud over you the whole time you're homeschooling, thinking you're not doing a good job and that everybody else is doing it better. So I will say about our mother's room, as much as I love our mother's room and believe in having a mother's room, in the mother's room, mothers sit there and brag about how good they're doing, and all the other mothers who aren't talking are thinking, I am a horrible mother. I am a horrible homeschooling mother because they're doing wonderful things. And
I knew I was failing, and now it's been confirmed.
Because deep down, we're all thinking we're not doing a good job.
Yeah.
Because you don't really have any standard to compare to.
Yeah.
And so you're always wondering, am I okay? Is Johnny okay? He's not reading yet. You're not doing a good job, and because you don't have a degree in teaching, you don't think you can do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would assume you either kind of hear the bragging or we're all horrible. Like I think that's one or the other. But hopefully they're able to lift each other up, and I see a lot of good communities in the mom's room.
And they do. I love it. I love the fact that they're there for each other. But every now and then you can just see someone in the corner very quietly
melting,
doubting. What are they doing? And wondering. And so, it's hard. Homeschooling is hard. The other thing I've read and heard that when you start to homeschool, especially if you have multiple kids, something's got to give. Mm-hmm. You can't maintain maybe the same level of cleanliness in your home. Maybe that won't be quite the same. Maybe something will have to go. Maybe you'll have to give up a book club or ladies' Bible study, or maybe something will have to change in your schedule. Or a part-time job. Something's going to have to give. You can't just add something like homeschooling to your plate and everything else stays the same. Mm-hmm. It's too big and it's too important. It does become the all in all.
Well, I have somebody was in the program here whose 4 kids did very well. But one of the things she said is she feels that homeschooling is about skills. You're learning skills. Mm-hmm. And those skills are not just reading and math. They are skills like doing your own laundry, like being responsible for this or that. Her kids all had jobs where they worked. It was a job they worked and made money. I think it was 11. And so it might have been a cookie business. 2 of the girls had a cookie business. It could be any number of things, but she insisted that they learn how to budget for something, the responsibility of cookie making, of making the cookies, doing them properly, of getting them where they belong, packaged in the right way, and so forth. But that's kind of the glory of homeschooling, is that sometimes the skills that are taught are not, like we're discussing, are not necessarily
testable.
Yes, or textbook-ish, but they are things you need for life, and you can decide how early they learn those. Mm-hmm. And this particular person, kids started doing their own laundry at 3. And when they didn't want
Must
to.
have had a front loader.
This is what. And by the way, if they didn't want to, it was their day. They didn't have to. We go sit over there. And after an hour, are you ready to do your laundry? No. Okay. They'd sit another hour. But I mean, it was hard. It was kind of hard love. But she was in a tremendous, she said, they'll all learn math by 5th grade. Don't worry. By 5th grade, you'll start to review some of those skills in the upper level ones you're doing anyway. But she was adamant on the everyday skills that had to be learned. And she had a little troop that didn't know any better. So I would throw that out as a value.
Yeah.
Is that this is, because if, as Carol said, you take on homeschooling and something has to give, it may be that instead of a Bible study or whatever, what gives is that you now have your little army. And they will learn those things. They will help you do those things.
Well, scrubbing the bathroom, I'll never forget when Nickel got his first job. They'd opened that little restaurant when the golf course first opened, Divots. So that was just, we could walk over before there was a fence. He could walk over, and his first job was over at Divots. And one day they said, go in and clean the bathroom. He came home that night after work and said, I am so glad Mom taught us how to clean a bathroom. I wouldn't have had a clue what to do. You know.
Yeah,
So,
he was at the ready.
Yeah.
They should have been very impressed.
Yeah, the flexibility. There's so many good things about it, but it's a big undertaking. It's a huge undertaking. And I think great you get a home link that can help support, but not own it.
Yeah. Empower you to do what you're wanting to do.
And one of the things that we was not preached at us, but we took in, was the fact that you need to have a light touch on moms. That is like a foundational truth, light touch as a consultant, as a program. You give them grace. Don't be heavy on expectations, but allow them to flourish if flourishing's possible. Allow them to try again or whatever. But you're there to support. You're not there to insist.
And we got that, it was our first or second year of HomeLink. I think it was our first, and I had no clue about anything. And so I asked if I could go visit other programs throughout the state, because they had been established on the west side of the state before they kind of oozed over here. So they had been going for a few years. So Sharon, my secretary, and I went over together. It was so much fun. And we visited 5 or 6 programs on the other side of the state, some of the very beginning programs. And it was when we went to Battleground and spent a lot of time with them, a lot of time. And that's where a lot of my thinking and the way we developed came from their program, because they were more established. And he gave me the printout, having a light touch on moms. And he said, and this was the founder, the first principal, I believe, he says, because that was his 2-story building. He was up above. He said, I looked down on the parking lot and I see this mother pull up in an old station wagon, and all these kids pile out, and she's got a baby, and she's got a toddler, and then she's got a
bag.
And I watch her coming into our building, and I think, what is it that makes her go to all the effort to pack up those kids and bring them in here every week? And what do we have to offer them to make it worth that effort for her? And that has always stuck with me.
Beautiful.
When you have these people coming, we've had people driving from the valley, from, up north, Newport.
Cheney.
They drive Cheney, they drive, you're going, what would bring them here to make the effort to pack up your kids and give us your full day and the lunches that you made and the drive and the gas, then you have to go home and have dinner. What is it we can offer that makes it worth all that effort?
Yes.
And that comes back down at the bottom, having that light touch on mothers. Remember, looking at this from their viewpoint, what are their days and weeks like? I look at our families that have 10, 11, 12 kids. What is their day like? And during COVID, when we couldn't be on site, I went to some of the homes to make contact and just, kind of excuse to go see people and take toilet paper. I was always welcome because I'm kind of known as the toilet paper queen, and I have a lot of toilet paper just in case the end of the world comes.
She could take.
So I have cases of toilet paper that I can share with others, and so if they're a large family, I figured they might need it since there wasn't much toilet paper to be had that year.
Because you were collecting it all.
I was ready for the end of the year. At the end of the world, and it might be the end of the world, we weren't sure, but I knew they probably had more kids than I did. So I would deliver toilet paper to these people and see how they were doing educationally.
What song do you play on your van as you're going around with toilet paper?
No, that special song.
Not the ice cream song. I don't know.
But they were always happy to see me. Who wants to see their consultant when you're, just, in the middle of COVID? But they were usually pretty happy to see me.
You're happy to see anybody in the middle of COVID.
But it gave me a view into their homes and to see what life is like when you have 10 kids. And it's that remembering what life is like, because by then my kids were grown and I didn't have quite the same stuff going on in my house. I could keep it a little better. And just remember, that's what it's like. Piles of laundry everywhere. Yes, I remember those days when I did 5 loads a day. I remember those days. When I never used cloth. I only used cloth diapers because, whatever.
Because there weren't any other options. No other options.
You always had diapers in the bathtub and a diaper pail. Who does that? Nobody. But just to remember, what is it like from the mother's view, so you can have that sympathy and that compassion and that understanding. And maybe, Stephan, you at some point can be the one to say, maybe this is too much for you. If it comes to that, if you see that, So we're just a sounding board. I'll never forget first year. The mother, she could not get him to learn those times tables, that little guy. I remember how old Corey was. But he was not learning his times tables, and it was my first year, and we tried every method under the sun. I bought everything flashcards, this program, that program. You're going to learn the times tables. He wasn't. He just didn't. And she's weeping. Can't learn his times tables. And finally I'm just saying, when he stands before the Lord, I doubt if he'll have to say his times tables.
And the Lord will know how hard you tried.
And eventually they came. Who knows when, but it did come. But it didn't come on time.
Are you sure? Because it said, how much time should you forgive? 70 times 7. And the guy's like, I don't know. I'm like, sorry, we're full.
But my point was, okay, let's look at the big picture. What is the most important thing we teach our kids? Times tables are important, but in the big scheme of things, they're not the most important. I said, we're really doing this for good character.
Mm-hmm.
We are.
That's why we're doing this, is to help be having good character.
Stephan, when I can't remember what year it was, but Carol asked me if I would, we had 2 families as the fall started, 2 families that were probably going to need to pull from HomeLink just because of their own circumstance. One had just had her 8th baby, and they had adopted 3 from Ethiopia, so she had 11 children.
Wow.
And she just could, the baby was born in August, she just could not get all of them here for classes, and we had to have direct contact. And the other family, they had had a horrible fire, and their entire home and grounds and so forth had burned. They had 8 kids. 4 of them were from, remember where the boys were from? Well, it was in Africa. I don't mean to, reduce it. I can't quite remember. But I said, well, sure, I could go to their homes, and it would be once a week, and I put the 2 visits together, as I recall, and there was nothing like going to those homes, and they operated very differently. So that was good. Again, I didn't homeschool. I felt like I'd gotten pretty knowledgeable about it, but to see the The one mother it was still a very large, long table that her husband had built, and the kids of all ages sat around it. And I tell you, I felt like a queen bee when I went there. Oh my goodness, the swelling was coming. It was but it was dear and heartfelt and sweet. And the other family, the mom, very structured, and each student had a cubicle within a round room, and her desk was in the middle. And she really had things well orchestrated, and it was very neat and meaningful and difficult curriculum and so forth. But I would just say that was a fundamental year for me to, as Carol is saying, to have a first-hand eye view of the variances within how parents can shepherd those kids. These are their kids. They love them like no one else. We want to homeschool. It can be done so many different ways, but at the nub, it needs to be done with love, and those kids need to feel that love, even though they are, they're learning at home, and it's not what their neighbors are doing, and so forth. But it was a great opportunity for me. And we did it during COVID too, Carol, I remember. But it's a healthy thing. And it was another one of those ask for forgiveness, not permission. We didn't know if we could go home and visit people in their homes, but we didn't know that we couldn't. And so, those were the early days, and that was one of those little beauties in the flexibility of HomeLink also. Oh. Made a big difference.
Yeah, I appreciate, it feels like Washington State has the perfect laws set to allow this, that I don't even know if they were going to start from scratch, if it would even happen the same way. It's just, this has been 30 years or more in the making, and just...
Had they known what they were doing, they would not have passed the law.
They know not what they do.
They had no clue what they signed off on.
But the door's been open, and
there it is. The door got opened.
The bell has been rung.
And the horses are out of the barn.
They are.
All the analogies. So I think, it's really amazing, because I'll talk to people in other states, and they talk about charter schools and school of choice. I'm like, we kind of already have that, a little bit. We got publicly funded programs throughout the state. None of them look identical. They're all catering to the people that live near them, and we've got some big and some small, and that's one reason I love going to WALA, and just the different meetings that we have that just allow us to connect and see what people are doing, despite the state. No, not despite this, but with the state's blessing.
One of the great things was when people would come in with their interview, and you'd be getting to know them, and do they have questions and so forth, and they'd say, and a little gingerly, how much will this cost? And when you can look at them and say, oh no, this is on us. We're a public school. Yeah. But the flash of, and then to see the curriculum library, which has always been a little toast of the program, just such a tremendous option, just literally hands-on and so forth. There have been some delightful moments because of what the state, and then, I feel like we have to compliment the district. It just, they have allowed us to thrive, Stephan. They really have. I remember, so it was my second year. I made it through that first year. Now wasn't an easy year, but they were hiring a new superintendent, and we were asked to write something. Just be reflective on what would we like to see in a new superintendent. And I can remember writing down, I don't know if anyone ever saw it, but just that my hope was that whomever they hired would allow HomeLink to continue to thrive and to be who it was and to function as we were functioning, to be charmed by it and not try to perhaps maneuver it into something more like the other schools in the district, or to use it in some way. But that superintendent was Travis Hansen, and I just feel like he was spot on.
He was great. He understood us.
He did, and he allowed so much. We just carried on as well as we can. You know that as these programs became more visible, viable, the state it was sort of, what have we here? What now? What are these?
What have we created?
but the ALE laws, tightened. And of course, that means that you've got to alter the way you do things too, because you have to comply. And I just felt like, even though there were plenty of awkward years and decisions and, getting a new data system and new student information, all of that, we were able to sort of stay HomeLink, I felt, through all of those critical years.
And I think one thing, because I know you at one point want to talk about specialist, one thing
maybe next time.
And we might do that. But the fact that during all of that, we were able to keep our model,
yes,
which is a little unique, of our specialist model. And I think that does set us apart in a lot of ways.
Oh, we are blessed beyond belief that we can operate the way we do.
When people ask, the difference between here and River HomeLink, the district's support has made all the difference with how these programs have grown and developed and changed over the past, in my experience, like 10 years for me, but that's been a lot of change for both of them. And so it's cool to come here and see what it looks like when you've got the second largest school in the district, sometimes largest, depending on who you ask.
It used to always be the largest. I don't know what it is now.
But just what that support can do. And just the fear is not there.
No,
and that
we don't
allows,
fear administration. We're not always waiting for their shoe to drop.
Yeah, that's sometimes how it felt in the other.
Mm-hmm. But, well, it's a little district, and I think that's why.
Yeah.
I think the fact that it's small, we've had board members with children in the program.
Oh, we have.
And again, it goes back to community. A lot of our board members grew up in this community. Mm-hmm. So they were here when the program developed. So they know it and understand it to that level. And you all know each other through the community, a lot of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, it's a unique, it's a thrilling thing. It really is.
Well, thank you, both of you, for being here. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, Deer Park School District. For making this program what it is. For people who, like me, have been only here for a couple years, or people who've been around for 20 plus. This is a cool place.
It's a great place.
If you're listening to this, if you're still here after something, we're going to push almost 2 hours. But if you're still here, we hope you enjoyed this, and we will keep going. And I don't know, see what happens.
Sure.
Call your consultant and let them know you love them. No, I don't know. Thank you for listening.
Chocolate is always appreciated.
Perfect.
Thank you, Stefan.
Thanks, Stefan. That was fairly painless.
Fairly painless.